Day 557 of the Russia-Ukraine war. Russia launching a 3.5-hour drone attack on the southern parts of the Odessa region, hitting the Danube River port infrastructure and injuring at least 2 people. This comes after Ukraine launched its most significant attack into Russia since the start of the war. The drones used there targeted 6 regions, including an airport, disrupted flights across the country, and Ukrainian forces saying they've breached the first line of Russian defense on the southern front. Joining us now, foreign policy expert and geopolitical analyst Harley. Also joining us, retired U.S. Air Force Brigadier General and U.S. Deputy Military Rep to NATO Blaine Holt. General Holt, I'll start with you. It appears to me, and I think to many, Putin has locked in on applying pressure to places that have a ripple effect beyond the border of Ukraine. Namely, we're talking about food, we're talking about energy. Talk to us a little bit about how this latest attack follows that trend on things that impact people around the world far beyond the battlefield.
Joe, it's great to be with you and Harley. What we see the Russian army doing now is looking to probe to eventually close off that coastline. So I would call what the Russians are doing there the precursor to a potential offensive movement into Odessa. That would be part of their strategy. The elimination of the food stocks is horrific. There's many different layers to all of that, and all of them reprehensible. But we also have to look at what's going on the Ukrainian side, where they're really throwing every last reserve that they have into just to the east of there near Robotyno and trying to get ahead into Melitopol. Do they have the logistics to pull that off? I'm not sure that they do, Joe. It's very dangerous calculation. And then we see all the asymmetric attacks that are hitting Skov airfield and others in Russia that are disrupting the Russians. So the whole of it is we see that strategically the violence is going up, and I think we're just on the verge of a new chapter in this war, possibly the one that's decisive.
Absolutely. Harley, want to bring into this conversation because I think particularly for the folks at home, it's easy to kind of get lost in Danube this, Odessa that. But if you really focus on some of the key points, right, buffer regions and choke points, you're looking at, a standoff around the export of grain on the Black Sea. Now this latest aggression with the Danube feels a little bit like we're having a Cuban Missile Crisis level event there. If we understand that if you look at World War II and many of the worst conflicts around the world, they've all begun with kind of simple, isolated acts. What are some of the unintended consequences and the blowback that could be just kind of devastating, not just for the Ukrainians, but also for America and our allies?
Well, it may surprise you, but on the upside, the unintended consequences, one, it's boosting the morale of the Ukrainians because they're constantly the victims of Russian attack, and they've been dying to finally get feeling that they could go on the offensive. Remember, what the Russians are feeling is a fraction of 1% of what they've inflicted on Ukraine. Second is that this is the future of warfare. What we're seeing now with all these drone attacks is the way wars are going to be fought in the future. And I think that's really important and significant. And also, I think the last message here is that this is a signal to the Russians from Ukraine that we could take the war deep into your territory. Now, the consequences of that are one of two things. Putin could say, wow, this is really a problem, especially if they attack Russia's elites, who would put pressure on Putin saying, this is a problem for us. You got to do something to stop this. Or it could make Putin double down and say, this is too much. You're escalating on Russian territory. Right. You're killing Russian civilians. We're going to hit you back twice as hard. And then the conflict gets even worse.
General, if you look at what's happened here, kind of the ancillary impacts of this war recently, we saw the ruble in Russia plummet. We saw the Kremlin working to try to prop up the value of the ruble. But certainly the largest booster for the Russian economy right now, the Chinese Communist Party. Russia is now the largest exporter of crude oil to China. They've passed Saudi Arabia. Certainly that's good for their bottom line. Trade exports from China to Russia have increased over 21% since the beginning of the war, 17% in this last quarter alone. In your opinion, has Russia basically become a sovereign de facto subsidiary of the Chinese Communist Party? And if so, what does that mean for us, for the world, and our effort to try to prevent this war of expansion from bleeding over into what could be World War III?
Well, there's definitely an alliance here, and Russia definitely has a dependence on Beijing. The problem is they're betting on a racehorse that's in real trouble at home right now. The Chinese Communist Party's got its own back against the wall with its own people for a variety of reasons. Leading the pack there is their economy is vaporizing as we're having this conversation. The place where Russia is also getting buttressed is Europe's just not able to logistically support the sanctions. Their LNG imports from Russia are up 40% since the loss of Nord Stream 1. There is gas getting relabeled from Azerbaijan through Saudi Arabia, all coming into the EU where there's a demand signal for it. So Russia's not in happy times. This is not an economic boon to Russia, but at the same time, the sanctions have their limitations. Where we should look is the BRICS thing for real? And is Russia and China going to be at the head of it? I think as long as India holds where they're at, I don't think we have to worry about that.
Absolutely going to have to leave it there again. This new unholy union, axis of evil brewing. Certainly, we have to do something about that. Harley, Blaine, thank you so much for joining us.